sometimes we have things not go our way and we may get frustrated. But overall, in all of those stories, we have to remember that God has a plan for us. And that we're a part of a bigger story. We're a part of a story about love and forgiveness that bring hope. Over this summer, we've been looking at, and actually over the whole year, we've been looking at different characters of the Old Testament. And today, we come to King Hezekiah. And King Hezekiah is actually one of my favorite kings. And I have learned over the last couple services that a lot of people don't know anything about him. And so after today, I hope that you know a little bit about him. And I think for me, the story is about plans. And so as I was thinking about that, I was reminded of a plan that a friend of mine had, and he was telling me about recently. And it was a plan for dinner. And so he was going to go grill, and he had his hot dogs and his brats and his corn and all the fixings all ready to go. And he went to light the grill, and nothing happened. It was out of gas. And at that point, he realized that it was late, and the kids were getting hungry, and they were grumpy. And so he went to a neighbor's house. And he said, hey, can I borrow your grill for just a moment and cook up our dinner? And the neighbor said, oh, you know what? This is amazing, because actually we just talked to 3 other neighbors, and they're all on the way over with their grilling stuff, and we're just going to have a little bit of a block party. And normally what would have happened with my friend is that just the plan not going as he thought it should would have unraveled him. But instead, there was a bigger picture that he could see after the fact. And I really think that's what we can learn from Hezekiah, is that God has a plan that's bigger than anything we could ever see or think of, but we're a part of it. And so let's just take a look at Hezekiah a little bit and the history that is there from his time as a king. Well, we know that it's an important thing because his story is repeated 3 different times. And one of the things that I really love about Hezekiah is back in about 2015, 2016, or 2014 or 2015, somewhere in there, this little piece of a coin was found. And when new kings came into power, new currency was created. And so this little piece is actually a coin that says King Hezekiah. And it tells us, and it was found in Jerusalem, so that tells us that he was an actual living king. And for me, that brings the story even into more light and into a real aspect that says, oh, wait, this actually happened. And so as we look at it, we need to look at the area where King Hezekiah was. And so as we look at the geography, we see that Judah is where King Hezekiah was reigning, and he was a king that loved God and did as God said. But up to the north is the Assyrian Empire. And the Assyrians really had only one goal in their life, and that was world domination. And at this point, they had a king named King Sennacherib, and we'll get to him in a minute. But as the Assyrians had this idea of world domination coming in, and Judah is sitting in the middle, you had Egypt to the south. And a lot of the Israelites, a lot of God's people had put hope in the fact that Egypt would come up from the south and kind of save them from the Assyrian attack. But that didn't happen. There was attacks that happened along the way. That's why as you look at this map, you're going to see those red stars. Those are places where the Assyrian army came down and they took hold of some of those strongholds. You'll see the last one is this town called Lachish, right? And so we know that King Sennacherib held siege to Lachish because he had this huge mural in his palace. It's called the Siege of Lachish Relief. And in it, it documents everything that happened there. And this relief was found, and it's now in the Israel Museum of History. And in it, it depicts these atrocious things. Like, if this was put into a movie, I wouldn't want to watch it, because the deeds that were done to the people at Lachish were so awful. And so we get this picture of who King Sennacherib is and what he wants to do as he takes over the world. He just wants to annihilate everyone else. And as he was doing that, he conquered Lachish, and he sent this letter to King Hezekiah. And it basically says, hey, we're coming your way next. Jerusalem is going to fall. And King Hezekiah lays out that message, and he begins to pray. God, what are you going to do? God, how are you going to help us today? And King Hezekiah had something come to his mind and his heart, and that was to get all of the water that was fed, that was for the city of David or Jerusalem, to flow into the city, which is not an easy feat because the city is on a hill and these springs were outside the city at that point. And so he got men to help him, and they covered up the springs. But then they did this amazing thing where they dug a tunnel. And how they did that is they had these poles that were 6 feet across and so tall. I don't even know how tall they were, but they would get men around them, and they would lift up these poles and they would drop them. And then 80 feet under the ground, the guys who were digging would hear them. And as they would hear them, they would dig in that direction. And so all you engineers out there, you'll notice this is not a straight line from one area to the next. But what it is they were following the vibrations, and in some way they met in the middle there. And so the Gihon Spring was now channeled into the city of David. And that meant that if Sennacherib was able to come and lay siege to Jerusalem, his army would not have the advantage of having all of the water that was outside the city and then starving the people who were in. But now the people in the city had that water. And so this is mentioned in all three accounts of King Hezekiah. But God had a bigger plan in store. And so what happens is, as they advance on Jerusalem, an angel, the Lord sends an angel, and he kills 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. So if we take that into perspective, that's 2/3 of the population of Fort Wayne and the surrounding area. That is incredible. And actually, someone last night told me that in the news recently, they think they found this area of the Assyrian encampment that this happened at. And we know that this is actually a thing that happened as well, because if you see that pillar there, that documents all of the sieges and all of the battles that were won by King Sennacherib. And when it comes to Jerusalem, it mentions that they advanced on Jerusalem, and that's all it says. In all the other ones, it says they lay siege and conquered. You see, God had a bigger plan for his people. Now, King Hezekiah and building that tunnel, there was a plan for that as well. And it served the God's people well through the years. And actually, it's still there today. And it comes into play as we look at Jesus and this blind man. You see, as Jesus goes to that blind man and says, wash in the pool of Siloam, that pool of Siloam is fed by the spring of Gihon. And so you get this full picture that God has a story and a plan that's even bigger than anything we can imagine. And so as Jesus is asked, who sinned, this man or his parents? And he says, no, it's not about that. It's so that the works of God may be displayed in him. We get a little glimpse of how God uses people, right? He used King Hezekiah, even in that story, to help with the pool of Siloam, but we see how God is glorified in this gentleman who can get his sight back. He didn't wake up that morning thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to see by the end of the day. He was going about his business, but God had a plan for him and his life. And we know that Jesus does things out of this in all of the Gospels out of love. He goes to people who are untouchable, and he shows his love by healing them and by forgiving them and giving them a hope for tomorrow. And in all of those stories, God's work is displayed, and the people go from there and they share that story out. We know that Jesus' story isn't just about healing the blind man. We know that it takes him to a cross and an ultimate show of his love for all humanity. The bigger story that's out there that we're a part of. And then it takes him to an empty tomb, and knowing that his promises are all true. So when he says that he loves us and he forgives us, those are things that we can hold on to. And so as we look at our own lives, and we have the things that go right and the things that go wrong, there's a bigger picture. It's not just about those moments. But in those moments, that bigger picture can be revealed as we display his glory, the works of his hands. My friend, who could have had just a meal with his family, ended up being able to just speak love into 4 families, right? Sometimes we have things not go our way, and we may get frustrated. But overall, in all of those stories, we have to remember that God has a plan for us. And that we're a part of a bigger story. We're a part of a story about love and forgiveness that bring hope. And so, my hope is that as you go through this week, and you come across some of those things that you might find as not going your way, or things that you celebrate, or things that you just happen upon, that you're able to reflect just a little bit on how they help display the works of God, how they help people around you know his glory and his love and his forgiveness. Because that's what it's about. It's about being connected to Jesus, but then that connects us to others as we share that story of his works in our lives, so they can be works in others' lives. And so in all the celebrations and all of the things, my hope is that you are able to see the works of God being displayed through you and the people around you to give him glory in all that he does. Amen.